Previously on The Princess Never Knew That Her Heart Could Choose a Servant Over a King. At a tense palace meeting, two kings and Prince Tund argued over how to stop a dangerous rebel group. When no one had answers, Deli, the quiet guard, spoke up with a smart plan that surprised everyone. The Obi trusted him, Tund grew jealous, and Princess Chinyu saw him in a new light. And now, welcome back to our channel. Today's story continues with The Princess Never Knew That Her Heart Could Choose a Servant Over a King, Part 2. Enjoy. The order came down the next morning. A crisp, official memo from the office of the Obi, delivered by a stone-faced chief, Umizi. Deli was immediately reassigned. Effective immediately, he was to lead a special task force operating out of a secure location in Port Harcourt, focusing solely on the Delta Viper's threat. He was gone before Chinyu could even process it. There was no goodbye. No final, lingering look. One moment, his steady presence was the axis her world spun on. The next, he had vanished, leaving a silent, gaping hole in the palace routine. The corridors felt emptier. The gardens felt less safe. Her own rooms, once a sanctuary, now felt like a beautifully appointed prison. She felt his absence like a physical ache. It was the little things. The specific sound of his footsteps outside her door in the morning. The way he would subtly shift his position to block a sudden camera flash. The silent, reassuring nod he would give her across a crowded room. Now, there was a stranger in his place, a young, serious-faced guard from the Ubium Security Corps who was competent, polite, and utterly anonymous. 2 days into this new, hollow reality, Prince Tund found her having a solitary breakfast on her terrace. "Princess," he said, his voice slick with satisfaction. "I see you are adjusting to the new arrangements." Chinyu didn't look up from her tea. The palace is efficient. One guard is much like another. "Precisely," Tund said, missing her sarcasm entirely. He pulled out a chair and sat without invitation. "But efficiency is not the same as excellence. Your safety is paramount. And with this situation with the militants, I felt it was necessary to provide you with the best." He snapped his fingers. A man stepped onto the terrace. He was enormous, with a neck as thick as Chinyu's thigh and a bald head that gleamed in the morning sun. He moved with a heavy, predatory grace. He was dressed not in the uniform of the Ubium Guard, but in dark, unmarked tactical gear. "This is Gabriel," Tund announced, as if presenting a prize stallion. "Former Israeli Special Forces. The very best. He is now your personal head of security." Gabriel gave a short, sharp nod, his eyes cold and assessing, scanning the terrace for threats before settling on her with an impersonal stare. Chinyu's blood ran cold. This wasn't about her safety. This was a territorial claim. Tund was erasing Deli's role and replacing it with his own man, a symbol of his own power and influence. "That is unnecessary, Prince Tund," she said, her voice icy. "The palace security is more than adequate." "Adequate is not what I accept for my future wife," Tund replied, a hard edge to his smile. "Consider him a bridal gift. An early one, to ensure you are protected until our union is official." The words bridal gift landed like a slap. Disgust, hot and sharp, rose in her throat. He was talking about a human being, a person, as if he were a piece of jewelry or a new car. It was a vulgar display of power, a way to remind her, and everyone in the palace, that he was the one in control now. That Deli was gone and replaced by a superior, imported product. She looked at Gabriel, this hulking stranger who would now follow her everywhere. He was a cage, more explicit than any she had ever known. He was Tund's eyes and ears, a constant, looming reminder of the future she was being forced into. "How generous," she forced out, the words tasting like bile. Tund beamed, mistaking her frozen horror for gratitude. "I am glad you approve. He will accompany you everywhere. You need not worry about a thing." He stood, brushing an invisible speck of dust from his immaculate agbada. "I have a meeting with your father and the economic advisors. We are discussing the merger of our royal investment portfolios. A bright future, Chinyu. A very bright future." He left her there on the terrace with the silent, intimidating presence of her new gift. Chinyu stood up, her legs trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. She walked towards a balcony railing, needing air. Immediately, Gabriel took 2 heavy steps forward, his hand up. "It is not secure, ma'am," he said in a heavily accented, monotone voice. "Please step back." She froze, her hands gripping the railing. Deli would have assessed the sight lines, checked the rooftops, and simply moved to stand beside her, a quiet shield. He would never have treated her like a child or a prisoner. This was her life now. Surveilled, controlled, and suffocated under the weight of Tun's generosity. She missed Delhi with a ferocity that stole her breath. She missed his quiet competence, his respectful silence, the way he made her feel safe instead of captive. Looking out over the palace walls, towards the direction of the bustling city and the distant creeks where he now was, she made a silent vow. Tun could surround her with 100 Gabriels. He could call her his bride and plan their merged futures. But he could not control her heart. And her heart was with the man he had sent away, the man who was fighting for a kingdom that would never see him as anything more than a servant. The fight for her future, she realized, was now tied to his. And she would not let either of them lose. The frustration was a live wire under Chinyu's skin. For 3 days, she had endured the constant, suffocating presence of her new shadows. Gabriel, the hulking bridal gift, was a monument to impersonal efficiency, his cold eyes tracking her every move. The younger Ubium guard, whose name she learned was Samuel, was a nervous echo, jumping at every one of Gabriel's silent commands. It was the little things that grated the most. The way Gabriel would physically position himself between her and any staff member who got too close. The way he'd veto her usual evening walk through the less secure western gardens. She felt like a priceless artifact in a museum, to be looked at but never touched, never free. That evening, trapped in her sitting room, while Gabriel stood sentinel at the door, she finally broke. Pulling out her private phone, her fingers flew over the screen, typing out a message to the only person who would understand. Chinyu, I can't breathe. Tun's gift and his shadow follow me everywhere. It's like being in a moving prison. I miss the air. I miss the quiet. I just miss being me. She didn't expect an immediate reply. He was in Port Harcourt, deep in a dangerous operation. She just needed to scream into the void, to let him know the gilded cage was now reinforced with steel bars. But her phone buzzed barely a minute later. Delhi, a black sedan with a silver falcon emblem on the grille, will be at the south gate in 10 minutes. Be in it. Tell no one. Her heart slammed against her ribs. A black sedan? How? He was hundreds of kilometers away. Was it a trap? No. This was Delhi. Every instinct told her to trust him. 10 minutes later, wearing a simple, dark Ankara wrap and a headscarf, she slipped out a service entrance, her pulse thrumming. The south gate was a lesser-used entrance, mostly for supplies. And there it was, a sleek, nondescript black sedan, its only distinguishing feature a small, sleek silver falcon embedded in the grille. The rear door opened silently. Without a second thought, she slid inside. The interior was cool, quiet, and smelled of lemon and leather. Before she could even process it, Gabriel and Samuel had arrived, their faces a mixture of confusion and professional alarm. Gabriel stepped forward, his hand going to the door handle. The princess does not leave the premises without my authorization. The driver, a man with a calm, weathered face and sharp eyes, rolled down his window. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke to Gabriel in rapid, fluent Hebrew. Chinya froze, expecting a confrontation. But to her utter astonishment, Gabriel's aggressive posture deflated. He listened, his brow furrowed, then gave a short, sharp nod. He stepped back from the car. The driver then turned to Samuel and spoke in perfect native Igbo. Your service is appreciated for the day. You are relieved. Return to your post. Samuel, looking even more bewildered, glanced at Gabriel, who gave another curt nod. Without another word of protest, Samuel turned and walked away. The driver rolled up the window, and the car pulled smoothly away from the palace, leaving the 2 guards standing on the curb. Chinyu sat in stunned silence, watching the palace gates shrink in the rearview mirror. Her mind was reeling. The driver had just spoken to both men in their native tongues, with an authority that brooked no argument. And they had obeyed. They had relinquished their prime responsibility without a single call to their superiors. Who are you? Chinyu finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. The driver's eyes met hers in the rear-view mirror. They held a glint of respectful amusement. A friend of a friend, Your Highness. You are to be taken to a place where you can rest. They drove for 20 minutes, moving from the opulent government reserve area into a quiet, upscale neighborhood of sleek, modern apartment complexes. The car slid into the underground parking of one such building, stopping before a private elevator. The driver handed her a key card. Penthouse A is yours for as long as you need it. I will be here when you wish to return. Still in a daze, Chinyu took the key card and entered the elevator. It opened directly into a spacious, minimalist penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, silent view of the city lights and the distant glow of the palace. It was beautiful, serene, and utterly private. She walked through the open-plan living area, her footsteps silent on the plush rug. There was no one here. No guards, no aides, no expectations. Just quiet. She sank onto a large, comfortable sofa, pulling her knees to her chest as she stared out at the city. The surprise of the escape was now giving way to a deeper, more profound shock. Who was Delhi? She had always known he was more than a guard. His intelligence, his insight, his calm authority. But this was a different level. This was logistics. This was influence. A driver who could dismiss a former Israeli commando with a few words. A secure, luxurious safe house appearing out of nowhere. He had told her he had ears on the ground. She was starting to realize his network was far more extensive and powerful than she had ever imagined. He moved with the quiet efficiency of a spymaster, not a security guard. He had resources that operated in the shadows, resources that even Prince Tund, with all his wealth and foreign contracts, could not access or command. A slow, wondrous smile spread across her face. Tund saw Delhi as a servant, an obstacle to be removed. Her father saw him as a useful, low-born asset. But Chinyu, sitting in this silent sanctuary he had provided for her, saw the truth. He wasn't just fighting for the kingdom. He was building his own. And in the quiet of the night, far from the palace intrigue, the princess began to wonder if the man she loved wasn't just a king in spirit, but a king in the making. The silence in the penthouse was a physical presence, thick and unnerving after the constant low hum of palace life. With nothing but the city lights for company, a restless energy took hold of Chinyu. Her mind kept circling back to the driver, the effortless dismissal of her guards, the sheer, impossible competence of it all. Who was Delhi? What was his full name again? Chinyu closed her eyes, searching her memory. Then she remembered. Ayodele Bemiji Adeomi. He'd told her the first day she met him, at her 11th birthday. The name felt different now, not just the name of the man she loved, but a puzzle. On a whim, she pulled out her private tablet, connected to the anonymous Wi-Fi, and opened a search engine. She typed in Ayodele Adeomi. The results were mundane. A real estate agent in Abuja. A graduating medical student at Unilag. A LinkedIn profile for a mid-level accountant. Of course that's not him, she murmured, a small smile touching her lips. The idea of Delhi as an accountant was almost laughable. She tried Bemiji Adeomi, an obituary for an elderly man in Ibadan, a photographer's portfolio, a spammy-looking business directory. LMAO no, she chuckled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. This was a silly goose chase. Ayodele Bemiji brought up a Nollywood supporting actor known for playing comic thugs. She looked at the man's round, jovial face. LOL, definitely not that one. She grew more specific, adding security and Lagos. A few more generic profiles popped up, one for a bouncer at a high-end club. Who the hell is this? She muttered, scrolling past. Feeling bolder, she tried Adeomi Plus, private security. This led her to the website of a discreet, elite firm based in Cape Town. One of the listed partners was a man named Tund Adeomi. This can't be Delhi, she said, though her heart gave a little jump. A relative, perhaps? She searched Bemiji Plus military. The results were more serious. A retired brigadier general from the 80s named Bemiji. No direct link. Frustrated, she almost gave up. Then, on a whim, she typed in Adeomi Holdings. It was a long shot, but the name had a certain ring to it. The search returned a sleek, minimalist corporate website. Adeomi Holdings, Strategic Investments and Acquisition. The About Us page was predictably vague, talking about long-term vision and Pan-African growth. There were no pictures of leadership, but then she clicked on Subsidiaries. The page loaded, listing a dizzying array of companies. Her eyes scanned the names. A logistics company she recognized as one that handled sensitive palace artifacts. A tech startup she'd read about in a finance magazine. And then her breath hitched. There, third from the top, was Falcon Securities. The logo was a silver falcon. Oh my, she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The car. The emblem on the grill. Her fingers trembled as she navigated back to the main search bar. She typed Falcon Securities plus Ayodele. This time, the results were different. A cached article from a business journal 2 years prior. The headline, Low-Profile Titan, the man behind West Africa's most discreet security empire. Her heart was a wild drum in her chest. She clicked. The article loaded. It was mostly text discussing Falcon's unprecedented contracts with multinational corporations and several unnamed governmental bodies. And then, halfway down, was the sentence that made the world tilt on its axis. The company's founder and majority shareholder, Ayodele Bemiji Adeomi, famously avoids the spotlight, preferring to let his work speak for itself. A source close to Adeomi stated, he believes true security isn't seen, it's felt. He's not a businessman, he's a strategist. She read the sentence once, twice, 3 times. The air left her lungs in a rush. Oh no! Founder, majority shareholder, low-profile titan. This wasn't a man with good connections. This wasn't a guard who had done well for himself. This was an architect, a builder, a man who commanded a small, powerful empire from the shadows. The resources, the influence, the driver who could command Gabriel, it all made a terrifying, brilliant sense. He hadn't been protecting a throne. He had been assessing it. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her. The quiet in the penthouse was no longer peaceful. It was charged, electric with the magnitude of what she had just uncovered. She stared at the city lights, but she no longer saw them. All she saw was his face, the humble deference, the respectful nods, the way he always stood just a step behind. It had all been a performance. A flawless, masterful performance. What? The word was a choked whisper into the silent, luxurious room. The man she loved, the man she thought she understood, was a complete stranger. And the game she thought they were playing had just been completely rewritten. The sleek, silent penthouse suddenly felt like a cage of questions. Chinya stood up, pacing the soft rug, the tablet feeling heavy in her hands. The initial shock was giving way to a cold, clenching confusion in her gut. Founder and majority shareholder. The words from the Business Journal article echoed, but they clashed violently with another, older memory. A memory so clear it was like a film reel playing behind her eyes. Her 11th birthday. The palace gardens were a riot of color and noise, filled with cousins and children of chiefs. Overwhelmed, she'd slipped away from the party, hiding behind the large frangipani tree near the old stables. That's where she saw him. A tall, lanky boy, maybe 15, standing stiffly in a brand-new, slightly too large guard's uniform. He was trying to look stern and professional, but his eyes were wide, taking in the splendor of the palace. One of the older guards had clapped him on the back. Your first day, Ayodele. Don't look so scared. Just watch and learn. That boy was Delhi. He was 15. He was a guard. A new guard. She stopped pacing, her mind racing, trying to make the math work. If he was 15 then, and he was 30 now, that was 15 years ago. The article about Falcon Securities was from 2 years ago, but it spoke of him as an established, low-profile titan. How could a 15-year-old palace guard start security empire? The timeline wasn't timelining. It made no sense. Was the Ayodele Bemiji Adeomi in the article a different man? A relative? But the driver, the Falcon emblem, it was all too connected. A wave of frustration and hurt washed over her. She felt a desperate urge to call him, to demand an explanation. To shout, "Who are you?" down the phone. Her thumb hovered over his contact. But then she stopped. She remembered his message. The immediate response to her cry for help. He was in the middle of a dangerous, high-stakes operation against militants, a mission that could determine the stability of 2 kingdoms. And yet, he had taken a moment, a precious, risky moment, to orchestrate this for her, to give her a few hours of peace. He had felt her distress from miles away, and had acted. She couldn't. She couldn't call him with accusations and hysterical questions. Not now. Not when he was doing what her own fiancé and her father's chiefs could not. But the confusion was a storm inside her. She couldn't just let it go. Opening her messaging app, she navigated to her drafts. Her fingers flew, typing out the raw, unfiltered torrent of her thoughts, a message she had no intention of sending until she was back within the palace walls, until his mission was done. Draft to Delhi. I found an article. Ayodele Bemiji Adeomi, founder, majority shareholder, Falcon Securities, a low-profile titan. I remember a boy of 15 in a new uniform. I remember the day you started. The math doesn't work, Delhi. The story doesn't fit. Who are you? What game are we really playing? And why does the man in the article feel like a stranger when the man who sent this car feels like the only person who knows me? I need the truth. But not tonight. Tonight, thank you for the quiet. She saved the draft, a secret message in a secret phone, a testament to the terrifying, exhilarating mystery the man she loved had become. The quiet was no longer comfortable. It was filled with the deafening sound of a story unraveling, and she was holding both ends of the string. The illusion of peace shattered the moment the black sedan with the silver falcon dropped her back at the south gate in the pale light of dawn. The silent penthouse felt like a dream, but the oppressive weight of the palace was her reality. She had barely slept, her mind a whirlwind of falcon emblems and teenage boys in uniforms. She was in a foul mood, a storm cloud in a silk dressing gown, when Prince Tund found her at breakfast on her terrace. Gabriel, her ever-present gift, stood sentinel by the door, his presence now feeling like a deliberate taunt. "Good morning, my dear Chinyu," Tund beamed, looking infuriatingly well-rested. He didn't wait for an invitation, pulling out the chair opposite her and sitting. "I trust you slept well." "Adequately," she said, not looking up from her pap and Accra. "Excellent," he said, completely missing her tone. "I was speaking with my father and yours this morning. The situation with the militants, while unfortunate, has clarified things. A show of unity is more important than ever. We've decided there's no need to delay." Chinyu's head snapped up. "Delay what?" "Our union, of course," Tund said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The wedding. We're moving the date up. I'm thinking next month. A grand ceremony in Ibadan, then a reception here. The media will go wild." He said it with the same obnoxious, proprietary confidence he used to discuss merging investment portfolios. As if he were scheduling a board meeting. The casual arrogance of it, the sheer assumption of ownership, was the final straw. It snapped the last fragile thread of her patience. She placed her spoon down with a sharp, precise click. The sound made Gabriel shift his weight slightly. "Prince Tund," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "You are discussing a wedding. My wedding. And correct me if I'm mistaken, but there is a rather important step you seem to have skipped in this entire process." He blinked, his smile faltering for a second. "Skipped." "A proposal," she stated, her eyes locking with his. "You haven't actually asked me. You've discussed me with my father, you've negotiated with your father, you've even assigned me a bodyguard. But you have not, for one single moment, looked at me and asked." For the first time, Tund looked genuinely nonplussed. It was as if the concept was alien to him. Why would he need to ask? It was a settled matter. He recovered quickly, a slick, practiced smile returning to his face. He let out a soft, condescending chuckle. "My dear Chinyu, of course. You are right. The politics, the planning, it makes one forget the romance." He pushed his chair back and stood. Then, to her utter, horrified disbelief, he got down on one knee right there on the terrace, amidst the half-eaten breakfast plates. Gabriel remained impassive. A palace maid carrying a tray froze, her eyes wide. Tund looked up at her, his expression one of profound self-satisfaction. "Princess Chinyu Iziadi," he announced, his voice carrying, ensuring the maid and the guard could hear. "Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Together, we will unite two great kingdoms and lead them into a glorious future." It was the most sterile, political, and unromantic proposal imaginable. It was a press release delivered on bended knee. There was no love in his eyes, only ambition. No vulnerability, only calculation. Chinyu looked down at him, at the prince on his knee, and felt nothing but a cold, hard knot of disgust in her stomach. This was the man her father saw as the perfect match. This performance was what passed for romance in their world. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply looked at him, her face an unreadable mask of royal composure, letting the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable, letting him kneel there in the crumbs of their breakfast. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear as glass. "That is a very significant question, Prince Tund. One that deserves a considered answer, don't you think?" She stood up, gracefully pushing her chair back. "I will give you my answer once you have finished your business with the Delta Vipers. A real queen, after all, should not have her wedding overshadowed by threats to her kingdom." Without another word, she turned and walked past the frozen maid and the stone-faced Gabriel, leaving the Prince of Abaddon on one knee, his perfect proposal hanging in the air, utterly and completely deflated. The battle lines were no longer just in her heart, they were drawn right there, on the sun-drenched terrace. The click of her bedroom door was a gunshot in the morning quiet. Chinyu leaned against it, the polished wood cool against her back. Her heart was a frantic drum, beating a rhythm of pure, undiluted fury. She could still see him, the picture of arrogant expectation, kneeling on her terrace as if he were bestowing a favor upon the world. "Will you do me the great honor?" The words echoed, each one a fresh insult. He hadn't asked her. He'd asked the Princess of Eubium, the political pawn, the final piece in his strategic alliance. The man who sent a car to give her breath had seen more of her in a single glance than Tund had in all their stilted conversations. The residual anger was a live current searching for a ground. Her fingers itched. She needed to scream, to break something, to shatter the perfect, suffocating porcelain of this life. Her eyes fell on her private phone, left charging on her bedside table. The draft. The unsent, burning questions from a night before. Last night, wrapped in the quiet sanctuary he'd provided, the questions had felt dangerous, fragile. Now, fueled by Tund's obscene performance, they felt like weapons. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, snatching the phone. Her thumb found the messaging app, the draft folder. There it was. Her raw, middle-of-the-night confusion. "Who are you? What game are we really playing?" Tund's game was clear. It was a game of thrones and transactions, played in boardrooms and on bended knee. But Delhi's game, his was a shadow play. And she was done being a piece on anyone's board without knowing the rules. Without a second thought, without letting the fear, or the logic, or the consequence catch up to her, she hit send. The whooshing sound of the message leaving her phone was louder than any door slam. It was the sound of a bridge being ignited. For a moment, there was only the pounding of her heart and the stark, undeniable fact on the screen. Delivered. Then the reality of what she had just done crashed down on her. He was in Port Harcourt. He was in the middle of a den of vipers, relying on stealth and focus. And she had just sent him a message that could shatter his concentration, that demanded answers he couldn't possibly give over a text. She had let her anger at one man blind her to the danger she might be putting the other in. Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 dots that would indicate he was typing. Nothing. Just the stark, silent delivered. The anger drained away, leaving a cold, hollow dread in its place. She had wanted to shatter something, and she feared she just might have. The silence after sending the message was heavier than any she had ever known. The frantic beat of her heart seemed to echo in the opulent stillness of her room. She stared at the screen, the word delivered burning into her retinas. 1 minute. Nothing. 2 minutes. The screen remained blank. No bouncing dots. No typing. Notification. Just the brutal, silent confirmation that he had seen her nuclear bomb of a question. 3 minutes. Her earlier anger had completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. What had she done? He was in a volatile, dangerous situation. She had just forced her personal turmoil onto him at the worst possible moment. He would be distracted. He could make a mistake. The thought made her feel physically ill. Then a single, stark notification appeared. Delhi. Read. 8:14 a.m. That was it. Read. No response. No explanation. No reassurance. Not even an acknowledgement of the emotional grenade she had just launched into his lap. The word read felt like a door slamming shut. It was a void, an abyss of unknown reactions. Was he angry? Was he panicking? Was he shutting her out, deciding she was a liability he could no longer afford? The not knowing was a special kind of torture. It was worse than any confrontation. Her mind conjured a dozen scenarios, each worse than the last. He was cutting his losses. He was deleting her number. He was looking at that message and realizing the princess was more trouble than she was worth. She clutched the phone, her knuckles white. The grand, silent palace around her felt more like a prison than ever. She had tried to reach for the one person who made her feel free, and in her haste, she might have just pushed him away for good. The read receipt was a verdict without a trial, and she was left alone in her gilded cell, sentenced to wait. The silence after the read receipt was a physical weight on her chest. Chinyu stood frozen in the middle of her room, the phone a burning brand in her hand. Every second that ticked by felt like a confirmation of her worst fears. She had ruined everything. Then it happened. 3 small, pulsating dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. Delhi typing. Her breath hitched, a sharp, painful intake of air. He was answering. The relief was so profound her knees felt weak. What would he say? An explanation? A gentle rebuke? A cold dismissal? Her eyes were locked on the screen. Her entire world narrowed to those 3 dancing dots. They vanished. Her heart plummeted. A split second later, her screen lit up, not with a message, but with an incoming call. His name filled the screen. Ideal. Before she could even process the shift from text to call, before her thumb could swipe to answer, her phone's automated voice assistant, set to read out calls for when she was driving, announced the caller in its clear, robotic tone through the room's speaker. Incoming call. From Ideal. The voice was unnaturally loud in the tense silence. And in that exact, horrifically timed moment, her bedroom door opened. Obi Chinedu Iziati stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Chinyu, we need to talk about your behavior with Prince Tun this morn. He stopped. His eyes, sharp and all-seeing, dropped to the phone in her hand, its screen still blazing with the incoming call. The robotic voice had just finished its announcement, the name Ideal hanging in the air between them like a ghost. Chinyu's blood ran cold. She fumbled, her fingers slipping, desperately trying to silence the phone, to reject the call, to make it disappear. But it was too late. Her father's gaze lifted from the phone to her face, his initial irritation morphing into something else entirely, a deep, dawning, and utterly furious comprehension. He had not just heard a name. He had heard the specific, tense silence that had followed it. He had seen the panic on his daughter's face. The phone stopped ringing. The screen went dark. The only sound was the deafening silence and the unspoken accusation in her father's eyes. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the only sound in the room was the frantic beating of Chinyu's own heart. Her father didn't move. He didn't shout. His fury was a cold, silent force that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. His eyes, hard as flint, remained locked on hers, seeing everything, the guilt, the panic, the secret she had been guarding. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that was more terrifying than any sudden outburst, Obi Chinedu reached into the inner pocket of his embroidered agbada and pulled out his own phone. "Father, no!" The plea was out of her mouth before she could stop it, weak and desperate. He ignored her. His thumb moved across the screen, with practiced efficiency, pulling up a contact. He didn't have to search for it. Chinyu's blood turned to ice. He had Deli's number. He put the phone to his ear. The line must have been picked up instantly. Deli, likely thinking it was her calling back, would have answered. Her father's voice was low, a controlled whisper that crackled with absolute authority. Adiomi. He didn't use his rank. He didn't use Deli. He used the surname, a formal and distancing act. "You will listen and you will not speak," the king continued, his gaze still pinning Chinyu to the spot. "Your mission in Port Harcourt is terminated as of this moment. You are to report to the palace guard barracks the instant you return. You are relieved of all duties and are confined to barracks until I decide your fate." He paused, letting the order hang in the dead air of the phone line. "You have overstepped," he said, the words final and cutting. "You have forgotten your place, and you will be reminded of it." Without another word, he ended the call. The click of the disconnect was deafening. He lowered the phone, his eyes still on his daughter. The unspoken words hung between them, more powerful than any shout, "And so will you." He turned and walked out of her room, leaving Chinyu standing alone, the ghost of the call and the wreckage of her future lying shattered at her feet. Deli was being recalled, stripped of his command, confined, and it was all her fault. The moment the door clicked shut behind her father, Chinyu's composure shattered. A sob, raw and ragged, tore from her throat. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely grip her phone, her vision blurred by a flood of hot, panicked tears. She stabbed at the screen, pulling up Deli's number and hitting the call button. It rang only once before he answered. "Chinyu." His voice was calm, steady. The same voice that had faced down a raging mob. The sound of it broke her completely. "Deli, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He heard my phone, and he called you, and he's bringing you back, and it's all my fault." The words tumbled out between gasping sobs, choked with guilt and terror. "He's confining you. I've ruined everything." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then, to her utter astonishment, she heard it. A low, rich chuckle. It wasn't a sound of mockery. It was a sound of genuine, deep-seated amusement. It was the laugh of a man who had just seen the final piece of a complex puzzle fall into place. "Chinyu," he said, his voice warm and impossibly fond. "Omalika NWA, stop crying. Dry your eyes." The old endearment, "Beautiful child," spoken in his deep baritone, soothed her more than any words of reassurance could. Her sobs quieted to hiccuping breaths. "But he's confining you to barracks, your mission." His laughter subsided, but the smile was still evident in his voice. Let him try. 2 words. Utterly simple. Devastatingly confident. What? She whispered, confused. Your father, Delhi said, his tone shifting to one of gentle explanation, just gave an order to a palace guard. A command he expects to be obeyed without question. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. But Chinyu, I stopped being just a palace guard a long time ago. The truth of it, the sheer, unassailable power in that statement washed over her. The falcon emblem. The driver. The article. The king had just tried to put a leash on a tiger, thinking it was a dog. The mission doesn't stop because a king is angry about his daughter's phone call, he continued, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur. And I don't stop either. Let him have his moment. It changes nothing. He was silent for a moment, and she could almost hear him smiling. Besides, he added, his tone light, almost teasing, now he knows. Saves me the trouble of having to tell him myself. A wet, shaky laugh escaped her. The world had just been turned upside down. Her father was furious, and the man at the center of a storm was laughing, utterly unafraid. In that moment, the gulf between the obedient servant and the shadow titan vanished, and she saw him, truly and completely, for the first time. He wasn't just fighting for her. He was powerful enough to win. Chinyu sank onto the edge of her bed, the plush duvet swallowing her. The initial panic had receded, replaced by a breathless anticipation. He was going to explain. He was going to tell her everything. She waited, the phone pressed to her ear, ready for the story of Falcon Securities, of the boy in the uniform, of the man he had become. But instead of a story, she heard a soft sigh. Chinyu, Delhi said, his voice shifting, the warmth giving way to a focused intensity. I'm on the front. And then she heard it. Faint but unmistakable. In the background, layered under the static of the connection, 3 sharp, percussive pops. Then another, quicker burst. Gunshots. Her blood ran cold again, but for a completely different reason. Delhi, she gasped, shooting to her feet. Are you shooting? Are you being shot at? Why are you on the phone? Hang up. Hang up right now, and take cover. A faint smile was audible in his voice, a maddening, calming anchor in her sudden storm of fear. Shul Malika. Breathe. It's just background noise. They're shooting at the tires of a boat about 200 meters away. My team has it handled. I don't care. Get off the phone. I can't talk now, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It was the voice of the man in command. And from what I've just heard about Tun's pathetic proposal, you need to leave that place before your father has him cart you off to his stinky palace in a sealed van. Despite the terror, a surprised, wet laugh burst from her lips. The image was so absurd, so perfectly insulting to Tun's grandeur. His palace is not stinky. It's old. Old places smell. It's a fact, he said, and she could hear the grin in his words. Then his voice softened again, becoming a protective cocoon around her, even from hundreds of kilometers away. Just stay inside your wing today. Don't engage with your father. Don't engage with Tund. Let them bluster. You are safe. I have eyes everywhere. Another distant pop sounded, and she flinched, but his calm was infectious. You'll be out of there soon, he promised, his voice a low, intimate vow. I'll arrange everything. The call ended, leaving her in silence. But the silence was different now. It wasn't empty or fearful. It was filled with the echo of his promise. She wasn't a princess trapped in a gilded cage. She was a woman being protected by a force far greater than palace walls. She curled up on her bed, pulling a pillow to her chest, and for the first time all day, a genuine, hopeful smile touched her lips. She felt, inexplicably, as if she was being held. The morning after the phone call, a strange energy hummed through the Ubium Palace. Chinyu, following Delhi's instruction, had remained in her wing, refusing all of Prince Tun's requests and her father's summons. She was a ghost in her own home, moving from her bedroom to her sitting room, the ever-present Gabriel a silent, hulking shadow. It was just past noon when Chief Amizi himself appeared at her door, his face a mask of bewildered protocol. Your Highness, he said, bowing slightly. A delegation has arrived. From the Pan-African Historical Preservation Society. They are insistent. A flicker of understanding sparked in Chinyu's chest. I'll arrange everything, Delhi had said. On what matter, Chief? She asked, her voice perfectly calm. They say they have a last-minute, time-sensitive opportunity. A private viewing of the newly discovered Benin diaries at their secure facility in Accra before they are unveiled to the world. They say it is a non-negotiable opportunity for a royal patron of your stature and interests. It was brilliant. Flawless. The Benin Diaries were the kind of historical coup that made academics weep. Her foundation's work in cultural preservation was her public passion, her unimpeachable excuse. No one, not even her furious father, could publicly deny her this. It was a masterstroke. "Tell them I will receive them," she said. The delegation that was ushered into the main receiving hall was not what anyone expected. There were 3 of them. A severe, elegant older woman in a crisp business suit who introduced herself as Dr. Adissa, the head of the society. A younger, tech-focused man who barely looked up from his fortified tablet. And a driver, the same calm, weathered man from a black sedan. But it was their demeanor that silenced the room. They were not supplicants. They were equals, here to collect what was theirs. They acknowledged the Obi and the visiting Oba with respectful but brief nods, their focus entirely on Chinyu. "Your Highness," Dr. Adissa said, her voice carrying through the hall without being raised. "The aircraft is waiting at the private terminal. The diaries are a fragile window into our past. We have a very narrow window of access. We must leave now." It was a statement, not a request. Obi Chinita stood, his expression thunderous. He could see the strings being pulled, but he could not see the puppeteer. To refuse would be to publicly spurn a major cultural institution for no valid reason, making him look like a petty tyrant. Prince Tun stepped forward, his smile strained. "This is a wonderful opportunity. I will, of course, accompany the princess." Dr. Adissa turned her cool gaze on him. "That will not be possible, Your Highness. The security protocols for this facility are absolute. The guest list was finalized and vetted weeks ago. There are no exceptions." She delivered the rejection with the finality of a judge slamming a gavel. Tun's face flushed a deep, mottled red. He was being dismissed. By a bureaucrat. The entire court watched, utterly captivated. No one moved. No one spoke. All they could do was stare as this unimpeachable, ironclad machine operated around them, making the powerful kings and the pompous prince look like irrelevant spectators. Chinyu rose. She felt a surreal sense of detachment. "Thank you for this honor, Dr. Adissa. I am ready." She walked towards them. Gabriel moved to follow. The driver, who had been silent, stepped forward. He didn't look at Gabriel, but addressed Dr. Adissa. "The security detail for this mission has been pre-approved and is already in place in Accra. Local personnel are to remain." Dr. Adissa nodded. "Of course." Gabriel stopped in his tracks. He looked at Prince Tund, who could only glare, impotent and humiliated. He looked at the Obi, who stood with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched. There was no order to give. There was no fault to find. The reason was too perfect. Chinyu walked past them all, past her speechless father, past her fuming fiancé, past the stunned chiefs and courtiers. She didn't look back. The delegation fell in around her, a seamless, professional shield, and escorted her from the hall, through the palace, and out to the waiting black sedan with the silver falcon. From the moment they arrived to the moment she drove away, all anyone in the palace could do was watch in stunned silence. The message was clearer than any declaration of war. Someone else was making the rules now, and that someone had just effortlessly plucked their princess from under their noses. Thank you so much for watching. Watch out for part 3, and so you don't miss it, do well to subscribe to our channel. Till next time, take care.